Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a triple sled here that doesn't seem to run right. I guess triples have a huge following and people love them, but this one's not running right, so I figured I'd make a video on how to fix it. It's probably something carb related. The spark plugs are kind of nasty on it, but let's go take a look. When you're dealing with older sleds, especially, you'll hear a lot about reading plugs and stuff like that. So when you have a sled that's not running right, it's always a good idea to pull the plugs first, take a look at them. As you can see on these plugs, they kind of look like they're just soaked with like dirty oil and they kind of smell like fuel. Normally that would be a rich condition, but in this scenario, we're just going to throw a new set of plugs in it. So we swapped the plugs on it, but there's no good reason not to give these carbs a good blow through, just because this thing's probably been sitting for a while and it's almost always a carb issue whenever a sled's not starting or running rough. Pulling the carbs off these triples are extremely simple. Really, there's just 3 fuel lines down there and then 2 coolant lines on either end of the carb, and then just the carb boots. You want to make sure you loosen those up enough to kind of pull those away. I get at first it could be a little intimidating with the air box on top of it, but that thing usually just pulls off real easy with just 1 bolt, maybe a sensor if you got a newer sled, and then there's usually a few screws there. But then they just pull away and they give you a lot of access to just about everything. So these are the carbs flipped over. As you can see, I already pulled one of the bowls off. Just usually 4 screws around the middle. You want to just push really hard so you can actually get the screw out. So a lot of times they strip out and then you got to drill them. But this is pretty much where all the magic happens in the carb. You got your float here, your main jet, and then you got your idle jet in here, then your mixture screw. So all your cleaning is going to happen on the bottom side of the carb. You want to make sure just not to mix anything up, and I'll take you through the cleaning procedures, but this is pretty much where you're going to be once you pull the carb off. Now I'm just popping off the main jet. They're almost always just a Phillips, and this is more of a needle seat for the flat slide needle. So I'm gonna put my hand in here and unscrew it and put that somewhere we won't lose it. And these are usually completely clean just because look how big that hole is. Usually always clean, but we're still gonna blow through it. And then the orifice tube for the idle jet makes sense that it's a lot smaller because it needs to be, it needs to atomize fuel at a slower rate. So you wanna make sure you put a lot of pressure on that downward pressure, and then start unscrewing. And it'll come out. You obviously want to make sure you don't drop it, because that sucks. But this whole sheath comes out on these Yamahas, I guess. Never really seen it done like that, but you just needed 2 hands for that. But as you can see, there's like these wicked tiny orifices here. And I covered this on another video, but what I do is I blow through them and I pass a wire through all these tiny orifices just to make sure that everything's clean. Now the idle mixture screw jet that you pull out, that guy you got to watch out, because usually there's a spring, a flat washer, and then an O-ring to seal it up against the carb body. None of that came out with it, so I'm just going to be very careful and leave it as is. But what you're looking for is no like broken pieces or gouging on this thing. So usually they're fine, but we're still gonna blow through that hole. So we're just gonna do that ×3, and then we're gonna put it back together, set the idle screw, and then try to run it. It's usually kind of rare that you find like a very obnoxious blockage, but on this one, I actually found a really bad blockage on every single pilot jet. You actually had a hard time pushing this wire through, but now that it can go through, we verified that the block is gone, so this jet should be operating properly now. So while you're in here, you always want to make sure you got good float operation. You kind of want to make sure the float isn't sticking. It's kind of hard to see in here, but you can kind of tell that this float is working correctly. And usually a good sign that they're working correctly and you don't have to dig too much farther into them is when you pull the bowl off. If there's fuel in there, there's a good chance the float's fine. You could always blow through the fuel intake port and watch it come out, and then push this down and blow through it. The correct test for this is if you flip the carb upside down without pushing down on the float, and you apply fuel to this side, then, or any sort of fluid really, then it shouldn't come out. Okay, so now it's time to set these fuel screws, the idle air mixture screws. And the way I'm gonna do this is you wanna run them down till they're all lightly seated, right? So like lightly 2 fingers on a screwdriver, you don't wanna yam them down. And then usually all Mikuni carbs are happy at about 1.5 turns out. The forums on this, for this Yamaha said that 2.5 was it. I'm gonna go to 2. So it's pretty easy to do this. Obviously, you just pay attention and watch one side of the screwdriver. That's 1 turn. And that's 2 turns. And that's it. Do that on every single one. So it's pretty much all back together. I like to run these things with the airbox off just in case I have to make small adjustments or anything like that. I'm not gonna burp the coolant just yet. That's gonna have to happen in a few minutes. I'll just pull that cap off just so I know, to remind myself. But we're gonna go ahead and try to start this thing and see if it rips up. Smoke's kind of cleared out now, but as you can see, she fired up immediately and she runs awesome. So I'm gonna burp the coolant. To do that, all I'm gonna do is just keep an eye on the fill level. Just add a little coolant in there with the cap off. Just run it up to temp till the thermostat opens, and then you'll see kind of like a smallish bubble come out, and then you're all done. Then you can put the cap back on and call it a day. I'm gonna throw the airbox back on, and that's about it. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I have tons more of this stuff coming. So, thanks. Bye.